we wanted to make sure they understood, like, when you're developing a menu or creating a recipe, there's math that goes into that, right? There's a history or an origin where that recipe came from.
This is Hourglass, the podcast for United Way of King County in Seattle. Coming up, a conversation with Sherry Williams, the Executive Director of Operations of Technology Access Foundation, a Seattle-based organization that provides STEM education for underserved students and support for educators of color. United Way of King County proudly supports Technology Access Foundation and how it spends its time using STEM as a tool for social change and educational equality. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for tuning in. According to WashingtonSTEM.org, by 2030, less than half of the new entry-level jobs in Washington state will pay a family wage, which is an income sufficient for a single family to live on. Of the jobs that will pay a family wage, nearly 2/3 will require STEM literacy. STEM is an education curriculum that was introduced in 2001 by the National Science Foundation, and it stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Though it began in the U.S., the STEM curriculum has spread worldwide. And the key to developing a STEM literate workforce is educating students in STEM subjects at an early age. But when it comes to access to STEM education in the United States, racial disparities persist. According to the Education Trust, 40% of Black and Latino students list science, technology, engineering, and math as their favorite subjects. But less than 3% are enrolling in advanced placement STEM courses. And according to a 2018 College Board study, of the nearly 71,000 students that took the Computer Science Principles Advanced Placement exam, only 176 were Indigenous. This poses a problem for our future workforce, as the website Teach Your Kids to Code says that about 92% of children will lose interest in STEM if they're not immersed by the 5th grade. The irony is that those students of color often live in communities that face the harmful effects of science, technology, and engineering. According to a 2024 Education Week article, the more than 500 abandoned uranium mines close to the Navajo Nation have increased the area's risk of cancer, kidney disease, and other health problems. And an 85-mile stretch of land along the Mississippi River in Louisiana, where 40% of the residents are African American, is home to more than 200 petrochemical plants and refineries. The swath of land is known as Cancer Alley because it emits pollution that is 47 times the acceptable Environmental Protection Agency rate. The risk of cancer in the area is disproportionately higher for Black residents. Fortunately, in Washington state, there are many organizations working to tackle the racial and ethnic gaps in STEM among students. They include Technology Access Foundation, also known as TAF, a Seattle-based organization founded in 1996 to transform K-12 education across Washington state, particularly among students of color. TAF has grown from providing after-school STEM programs for high school students to partnering with school districts, universities, and organizations to create healthy and safe learning environments that help students become critical thinkers, problem solvers, creators, and leaders. In 2023 alone, TAF served more than 2,500 students. 25% of them were English language learners. TAF is a member of the Black Community Building Collective, a coalition of 14 Black-led organizations brought together by United Way of King County to build relationships, share best practices, and implement strategies with United Way funding. We sat down with TAF Executive Director of Operations, Sherry Williams, to learn more about the organization.
TAF was started by Trish Malines DeZico and Jill Hull DeZico. And really the reason TAF started was from their vision of wanting to support children of color, students of color in the Seattle area to make sure that they had the necessary tools and resources to excel in their education and beyond. Um, Realizing that there was deficits in education, they started TAF starting with supporting high school students. And so with high school students, they created a program. The first program was called the Technical Teens Internship Program, TTIP. And it was designed to give students of color an edge and make sure they were excelling in a way that was above and beyond of what everyone else was doing. Because we know as people of color, you have to work harder in the various industries and you have to be on your A game. And so through that program, they created the TTIP program, which would provide training, not just opportunities for learning how to type or do a search on the internet, but like how to build a computer. That was the first class. And then from there, you picked a discipline. So it might have been web design or networking. And you stayed on that track your duration of high school. And so they would come from fall to spring, twice a week after school, 3 hours a day. So there was a commitment, a rigorous interview process. And if they succeeded with completing coming twice a week after school, they would get the opportunity to compete for a summer paid internship, which was paid through a company. So they would have these STEM skills, go in, interview. We would prep them for the interviews, and they would work full time for 8 weeks during the summer. And they would receive $1,000 scholarship for each year completed. So a student could start really in the summer of 8th grade and go all the way through their high school career. And then we would also, in addition to preparing them in specific STEM industries, we also prep them for college because we knew we wanted to make sure we built a pipeline that would have students start in an internship program and eventually become the employees for those particular companies. And so we were very successful doing that. And then with time, we started looking at our younger kids and like, what about the younger kids? And so we created a program called Tech Start, which was our K-8 program. And students would come in as young as 5 years old and start to learn and really started to learn how education was shifting and how kids were behind because we were teaching them, but if they couldn't read, it was difficult for them to learn in the programs. And so that's really was our start of our desire as an organization to really want to take on fully educating students, not just in after school programming, but throughout the day.
Wow. And so how many kids have come through?
Well, I don't have the total number, but I would say we have impacted probably, surely thousands and thousands of kids from Seattle through Tacoma. We're in 7 districts as of today.
Which districts?
Highline, okay. We're in Tacoma, we're in Federal Way. We actually co-manage a school in Federal Way called TAF at Sahali. It's 6th through 12th grade. And then we're in First Creek in Roosevelt, in Tacoma, Brigadoon also, which is a feeder into our school in Federal Way. We're in Beverly Park here in Highline. So we're in several of the different schools. Tacoma, Highline, and Federal Way are the districts we currently serve in. Yeah.
And what have been some of the jobs that they've worked?
In terms of the students?
Yeah, the internships that they have.
Oh, the internships. So many of the students from way back then are now like married with children and building their own careers and changing their communities. So engineers, nurses, entrepreneurs. Um, yeah, a variety. We have a variety of careers that data analysts, security. Um, yeah.
Okay. And how has the program evolved? You said that you've gone all the way from high school all the way to K-8. What are some of the other ways? And you're teaching reading. What are some of the other ways that the program has evolved?
So we have we do project-based learning, a lot of project-based learning. So when we were in our earlier years, we started very, very early on doing project-based learning, particularly when we had our K-8 kids, because we wanted to incorporate math, science, history. So if they had a project, say, on food nutrition, we wanted to make sure they understood, like, when you're developing a menu or creating a recipe, there's math that goes into that, right? There's a history or an origin where that recipe came from. Mm-hmm. So there's research that has to happen. So all subjects, try to include all of those subjects into one project. Okay. And that's what we have carried. That's part of our best practices that we use in the schools that we currently work with, is we bring in lots of project-based learning. We do coaching for teachers and administrators, and we support students in their learning through supporting them in the classroom. We have staff at Taft-Sahali who they're called student specialists, who go into the classroom and support in science and math, real time, not after school. We have a makerspace at our Taft-Sahali, which has it's basically a lab where kids go in and they build and create things using different technologies like 3D printers and things like that. Mm-hmm. Again, that incorporates math and science and time, just a variety of different skills in order to do that. Where they're building and creating.
So about how many kids go through the programs of all the schools? How many kids go through a year? About how many?
Ooh, I right now I think we're around 1,900
a year.
With being in all of our schools, and it's even beyond that, because we not only support the students, we also support teachers and educators. So we have a whole department, Network for Edwork, where we have a program called the Martinez Fellows Program, mm-hmm. and I think they're up to over 500 fellows in that program now, where we are supporting teachers of color as they're completing their teaching degrees, and then supporting them with going into these schools where there are predominantly students of color, because we know students of color do better when they see people that understand their culture and who they are and where they come from. And so we have that program, and then we have our Encounter program, which is for educators that educator leaders. And so that program supports principals and administrators, because we know how critical it is to ensure we have our teachers and administrators, because we need them in those roles and we need more. And so we want to bridge that gap of making sure that students are seeing people that look like them when they're in the classrooms. And we also know, when we think about Black and brown children and students in Seattle, we're already outnumbered. I mean, it's just not enough of us, mm-hmm. in the various fields, and particularly education. It's just a huge negative where we don't see enough representation.
So how did you get involved in this work?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. Yeah. I got involved in this work. I actually, at the time, my son was 8 years old as a single parent, and I was working for another nonprofit called Washington Works, and it was a welfare to work program. located in Pioneer Square. And my executive director and co-founder, Trish, she was serving on the board there. So I knew her kind of, but not really well. I would, correspond as being in an admin role there. And when Trish decided, when she was deciding to launch TAF and create TAF, it was a new organization for her and Jill. And being connected to Washington Works, she wanted to make sure that she was hiring from community. And so at the time, she sent over a job description. And my role at the organization at that time was to match women with different roles and prepare them to interview. And so when that happened, I received the job description for TAF. And when I read it, I was like, wow, the position was actually partly 50% admin and then 50% technical. Now, I still, 27 years later, don't have a technical bone in my body. But when I read the mission of serving students of color, and the organization was located in Columbia City. I lived in Rainier Beach. It was, my son's school was in the middle of those two things. And I was like, I could easily get to work, whether I took public transportation or drove, which was convenient at the time because I didn't have a vehicle. And I just love the mission of educating students of color. And that's who TAF has always been. And so I decided I would take that job description, and I called Trish and told her, like, I want to apply for this position. The organization doesn't know I'm leaving. I know you're connected. Is it okay for me to apply? And she said, yes. Go ahead and apply. And I applied. I came in and interviewed with the 3 staff that at that time, TAF was almost 4 months old. Oh. And then I thought I did terribly. I waited, and then it turns out that I got an offer. And from there, I have done many, many different roles. I like to tell people that really, my son and I grew up at Taft, right? So I recently celebrated my 27th anniversary, February 3rd. So, yeah.
For more information about TAF, log on to techaccess.org. That's TECHACCESS.org. United Way of King County partners with local organizations to address food insecurity. Among those organizations is Kent Food Bank and Emergency Services, which serves people living within the Kent School District. Kent Food Bank and Emergency Services allows 2 visits per household per month and is open Wednesdays and Fridays for all residents and on Thursdays for seniors only. For more information, contact kentfoodbank.org. And be sure to join our virtual event, Conversations for Change, Housing Stability, on May 29th at 11:45 a.m. We will delve into King County's housing ecosystem and share more about how we're coming together to help people overcome barriers to access and retain housing. For more information, log on to uwkc.org/events. At United Way of King County, we are working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. Hourglass United Way is a podcast that highlights how we and our partners spend time making a difference in our communities. Our work is made possible by the generous donations from people like you. Please send comments and suggestions about our podcast to hourglassunitedway@gmail.com. To learn more about our work or to support United Way, log on to uwkc.org. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for listening. Until next time.